I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
So now back in the courtroom, a jury is seeing graphic video in the trial of Michelle Troconis. She's charged in connection to the death of a Connecticut mother by the name of Jennifer DULOS. Prosecutors say the video shows Troconis and her then boyfriend Fotis DULOS driving through Hartford, Connecticut, ditching evidence the day that his wife disappeared. Our Fox News contributor.
Hey guys, good to see you guys here. It's quite interesting just looking at that statement that the Fox reporter uses. He says graphic footage. Would you say that this is graphic footage of someone throwing away garbage?
Paul Morrow, an attorney, Michelle Troconis. In graphic video in the trial of Michelle Troconis. She's charged in connection to the death of a Connecticut mother by the name of Jennifer DULOS. Prosecutors say the video shows Troconis and her then boyfriend Fotis DULOS driving through Hartford, Connecticut, ditching evidence the day that his wife disappeared. Our Fox News contributor.
Okay, so a lot rides on that moment that you've just seen there, that the moment that Fotis is right next to Michelle and puts something almost like into a mail slot, but into the slot of the drain. And I think one's got to ask, wouldn't anyone say, why are you doing that? Why are you throwing something away in the drain? And I think there are two possible ways to interpret, at least two possible ways to interpret that moment. The one is that Michelle genuinely had chewing gum on her fingers, and she genuinely thought that the sidewalk was cleaner than her own chewing gum on her fingers, which I think is a little bit of a stretch, or that the whole thing was a ploy. She wasn't really doing anything. She was pretending to do something on the sidewalk to basically block the view of what he was about to do. In other words, the door being open and her doing what she was doing was a kind of a line of sight thing that would kind of make it harder to see what he was doing. One wonders, one would give anything to know what was said. Come to me. One would give anything to know what was said just before that happened. Did they kind of have a discussion about what he was about to do? Because he stops there, he opens the door, doesn't get out, her head moves this way and that. Did they have some kind of discussion about it? Anyway, good to see you guys here. I just want to have a look at where the trial is right now. Hasn't started. We might actually watch a little bit of the Murdaugh trial because that has started. As far as I'm concerned, it's much ado about nothing. Is there going to be a retrial? I personally doubt it. There's a lot of interest in it. Certainly on Law and Crime Network, 10,000 are watching the Murdaugh thing, and 1,000, 10% are watching this, which hasn't started. We'll see if those numbers change. So should we quickly just jump into the Murdaugh thing and just to see what they're talking about while we're waiting for the Troconis trial to start? What do you guys say?
And you acquitted yourself honorably. So this question today is not about anything you did wrong. Please be assured of that. I respect you and I respect your service. Today, I'm going to ask you to do something that's difficult. This case is unique. Most of the time, if there's some issue about improper conduct or contact with a juror, it comes up immediately. The judge puts questions to the juror and perhaps to the person who may have made a improper comment, and then you go on with, to verdict. Or sometimes it's very shortly after the verdict is rendered. And again, the judge questions the affected jurors and the supposed interference and makes a ruling right then and there on either a new trial or a mistrial. Now here, we are almost a year after your beginning of service on this case. And that makes it mighty difficult for you to do something I'm going to ask you to do, and it's this. Today, I ask you to focus your attention. What is that? Mr. Bailiff, what is that noise?
I'm not sure.
Is that the sound system doing
I
that?
believe it's the core sound system.
This is the funkiest sound system in the world, so you just have to keep up with it. I've had trouble in every case I've ever tried with the sound system. So, jurors, if something happens and the sound system goes haywire, we'll stop for a minute until it stops. Now, as I was saying, I want you to focus your attention as you answer the questions I'm going to ask you on your 6 weeks of experience as a juror in this case, and on the point in the trial where the judge charged you, and on your verdict as you rendered it on March the 2nd, 2023. That's what I want the focus to be. And again, I know I'm asking a lot to have you cast yourself back into that time, but that's what the questions I'm asking are about that time and not about this time. There has been so much drama about this matter since the verdict was rendered, and my heart goes out to everyone, the lawyers and you who are in this trial. That I can't help. But I've been asked by the Supreme Court to take a look at this issue. The appeal is on pause until I do, and I've got to do my duty as I see it. And you do yours as I know you see it. So I thank you very much in advance for, again, the terrible inconvenience of calling you all back together now. But it's very essential to...
So something I heard in the lead up to this is the burden is pretty high. The bar that the defense have got to reach is pretty high. It is not just did the actually don't know what the term is for the woman who is at the court. I don't know. It's some lady who was taking doing a transcript for the court, and involved in some way, some court official. Did she have any influence on the jurors? Right. That is the contention that the defense want to make. You know, did this person have an influence? In other words, any influence? And compared to asking every individual juror, did this person influence your decision? And that's kind of a totally different question. So we'll see what happens.
All right, you may go to the jury room.
That's right, the court clerk. Now, I don't think we're going to, well, actually, I don't know. Are we going to see each juror on the stand? That'll be quite interesting. You can see it's a packed courtroom. But I must say, I find this quite disturbing. You have a high-profile case that is about a corrupt lawyer, and then the court process around it is kind of contaminated and not really trustworthy. I'm not saying not entirely not trustworthy, just that the opportunists around every corner, in a way. People trying to profit out of, you know, their position in the, as an insider in the judicial process.
One moment. We're not going to have a big colloquy about this. keep your seat for a moment, Mr. Harpook.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Bland, you do the same. Mr. Bender, is there a seat over next to you?
There is.
Mr. Bland, will you go over?
So while they're getting things organized, I have to say I was quite surprised to see Alec Murdaugh looking relaxed, smiling, joking with his lawyers. I mean, a heck of a lot is at stake for him. This is a double murderer who can possibly have a very serious sentence and conviction altered in some way, possibly mitigated in some way. Personally, my personal feeling is that it's much ado about nothing. Nothing's going to come out of this. It is a bit of a long shot, but you can imagine that it's the only thing he's got to work with. Someone described this as a like a really long throw, which you don't see very often in football or basketball. Well, it's a very long shot. I'm not covering it because I don't really think it's as I say, I feel like it's much ado about nothing. It's all the admin issues around the court proceedings. When someone's on trial, let's cover that. But I don't know. If we cover this and it turns out there is going to be no retrial, what a waste of time, as far as I'm concerned. I think there is some entertainment value possibly in what did the jurors think and say, and what's their side of the story. But we cover serious crimes here, not sort of academic sort of crimes, if I can put it that way. It is interesting to see how when the judge is present, he's a totally different person. He seems far more sober and serious now than before she entered the courtroom.
I will ask you some questions, and there are no right or wrong answers.
He's also got his glasses on, which before the hearing commenced, he didn't have on.
Of what you experienced in relation to these questions at the State versus Murdaugh trial. You rendered a verdict on March the 2nd, 2023. That verdict was read in open court by the foreperson of the jury. And then the court said this: Madam Forelady and members of the jury, if that is your verdict of each and every juror, let it be known by raising your hand. The transcript then indicates that the jurors complied. The jury was individually polled, and each was asked, was that your verdict? Each juror answered yes. Each juror was then asked, is that still your verdict? And each juror answered yes. Was that an accurate statement about your verdict at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Was your verdict based entirely on the testimony, evidence, and law presented to you in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you hear Ms. Becky Hill make any comment about this case before your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
If yes, what did Ms. Hill say?
To watch his actions.
To watch his actions. What else?
To watch him closely.
To watch him closely. Anything else you remember?
There is, but I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine. Was your verdict on March the 2nd, 2023, in any way with any influenced in any way with any communications by the clerk of court, Becky Hill, in this case? Want me to
Yes,
read it
ma'am.
again?
Yes, please.
All right. Was your verdict influenced in any way by the communications of the clerk of court in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And how was it influenced?
To me, it felt like she made it seem like he was already guilty.
All right. And I understand that, that's the tenor of the remarks she made. Did that affect your finding of guilty in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Be at ease. Those are my questions are submitted to the juror. Are there any reactions, further questions, and so forth? If there are, and you would like to voice them, I can ask the juror to retire to the jury room. Just tell me whether I need to do that. All right, sir.
So, what do you think are the stakes here? Do you think the prosecution wants a retrial? I don't. Maybe they can get paid for that. Maybe they do want a retrial. I wouldn't think so. Do the defense want a retrial? I would think. Do the media want a retrial? Do the public want another sort of, what's the word, a circus show? What do you think?
Yes, ma'am. Your Honor, in the affidavit that was given by this particular juror, paragraph 10 said, I had questions about Mr. Murdaugh's guilt, but I vote guilty because I felt pressured by the other jurors. We would request an inquiry as to that, which is how, when this motion was filed, she expressed the basis for her verdict, which obviously this answer is a little different now. So we would request a brief inquiry from the court as to that specific issue.
All right.
Thank you, Your
All
Honor.
right. Mr. Buckler?
Your Honor, as to two things. The first thing is, he is correct. She gave an affidavit. We would ask Your Honor to let her read her affidavit to refresh her memory of, she said other things. They're very detailed in here. We'd ask you to, and let me hand up to the court a copy of her affidavit and ask you to have her.
But I mean, think about what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with someone who sat in on a trial that went on for weeks, listened to a lot of evidence, and then basically said, someone said he's guilty, and then they just accepted what that person said. It's kind of beggars belief. Why would you do that from someone who's not a lawyer? Like, why would you throw yourself wholesale behind a comment that someone made casually, as though it's gospel? It just seems a bit odd, doesn't it?
Harpootlian, and he would like for me to give that to the juror and ask her to read it and then ask her about it. I'm inclined to do that, but I want to hear from you first.
Your Honor, again, if they want to refresh the recollection, that's fine with the state, so we have no objection to that.
Very good. It will be done.
Your Honor, also we would ask that you not ask the question that that Mr. Waters asked you to ask, because it violates Rule 606B, which provides upon an inquiry into the validity of a verdict or indictment, a juror may not testify to the effect of anything upon that or any other juror's mind or emotions.
What was the question he asked?
If you look at that affidavit,
It's paragraph 10, Your Honor.
paragraph 10,
It's in the very affidavit.
she said she was influenced by other jurors.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
going to ask her about that. I'm going to give her the affidavit and then I'm going to question her about it.
And we would, for the record, indicate that we object to that under 606B.
Your Honor, from our perspective, she's put an
And
issue.
you're the one that asked me to have her look at this affidavit, but you telling me I can't question about it? I deny that objection.
Your Honor, if it's something
So
Took up Stanford, at Stanford for these actions.
looks like our other case is happening.
Thank you.
Let's just go out of that.
This morning, the jury clerk indicated to the court that she had received a voice message from regular juror number 62. And the message was that juror number 62 had to attend to an emergency and had to leave the country today. As a result, juror number 62 has to be replaced out of the alternate pool. The court has discussed this with counsel and has indicated that it would have Madam Clerk draw the name of an alternate to replace juror number 62. Now, if counsel wishes, they can inspect the names of the jurors who are in the alternate pool who have been included in that draw, if you wish to do that. Attorney Felsen, Attorney Schoenhorn. Do you wish to inspect the names in the draw?
So it seems like we've also got a bit of a jury issue in this case, starting off these proceedings. I think that's going to possibly delay the start quite a bit. Today, we actually anticipating the testimony of Pavel Gumeni, who's a employee of Photos DULOS and quite an important witness, I think, in all of this. I think he'd also be able to talk a little bit about Michelle Troconis's potential involvement, her relationship with Photos, and what he witnessed, right? So that should be quite interesting. Well, it seems like the sound has been muted. Nothing seems to really be going on right now. Maybe we should just go back to Murdaugh.
Get me another copy.
It's in here.
Yeah.
It's in here.
Yeah.
Now, if you ask me, this is a lot of lawyering that's going on, lawyers with lawyers and so on, and they're really trying to win their case on a technicality. I mean, they're trying to play the game again and win it on a technicality. And I just wonder, was there really something going on? Or was there some kind of was there some kind of influence on some of these jurors based on shenanigans going on? You know, it just, as I said, it seems a little too convenient for someone to say, "Yeah,
Madam Juror,
my
you
verdict
gave an
was."
affidavit, to a representative of Mr. Harpootlian on August the 14th, 2023. And I have this in my hand at the present time. And I'm going to hand it to you. And I'm
Sorry, just
going
a
to ask
second.
that
I
you
just
read
want to
it. Tell me when you completed reading it.
get back
then I'm
to
going
that.
to ask you some questions. You're going to see 4 little boxes on this affidavit. They are your name, and the names of 2 of the jurors, I will strike that out before it appears in the record, just so you understand. Mr. Bailey, please pass this to the juror. Take a moment to read this and tell me when you have completed reading. Yes, ma'am.
Creighton looks kind of annoyed, doesn't he? I wonder how Murdaugh's able to afford all of these lawyers. They're not the cheapest in the world. Wonder how he's able to afford them. I don't know if you can see Stephen Smith's mother is also present. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see the consensus. What do the other jurors say? Is it one juror that feels like she had the light of revelation by one other person, or did they all feel compelled by this comment? Anyway, while we're waiting for, this is the danger in covering this sort of thing live, is dead time and this sort of thing. One thing I can share with you guys is,
First paragraph, of course, is a statement that you were a juror in the case. Second paragraph says, toward the end of the trial after the President's Day break, but before Mr. Murdaugh testified, the clerk of court, Rebecca Hill, told the jury, quote, not to be fooled, unquote, by the evidence presented by Mr. Murdaugh's attorneys, which I understood to mean that Mr. Murdaugh would lie when he testifies. Is that what your recollection is of that statement?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything in the statement that, on reflection, you think is not correct?
No, ma'am.
All right. Number 3, she also instructed the jury to, quote, watch him closely, quote, immediately before he testified, including, quote, look at his actions, quote, and, quote, look at his movements, quote, which I understood to mean he was guilty. Is that an accurate recitation of your view of the matter?
Yes, ma'am.
Number 4, paragraph 4. Immediately after he testified, the foreperson said Mr. Murdaugh was crying on cue. Is that an accurate statement of what you saw and heard?
Yes, ma'am.
5, the foreperson criticized the former foreperson for handing Mr. Murdaugh a box of tissues when he was crying on the stand while testifying about his murdered son. She told the jury, we cannot interact with Mr. Murdaugh because that's what the defense wants us to do. Do you still stand by that recitation of that conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Number 6, the jury frequently discussed the case during breaks before deliberation. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Number 7, toward the end of the trial, Ms. Hill came into the jury room a lot. Is that your recollection?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hill and the foreperson had private conversations on multiple occasions. The foreperson would tell the bailiff that she needed to speak with Ms. Hill. Ms. Hill would arrive, and then she and the foreperson would go to another room for a private conversation. The conversations typically lasted 5 to 10 minutes. The foreperson never said anything about the content of the conversation. For example, She never communicated logistical information after these conversations. This happened.
So my impression is this is another juror. Isn't this a second juror?
The interaction.
Yes, ma'am.
9, when we began deliberations, Ms. Hill told us this shouldn't take us long, quote. And if we deliberated past 11 p.m., we would be taken directly to a hotel. We had driven from our homes that morning and were not prepared to stay overnight. Additionally, smokers on the jury asked to be allowed to take smoke breaks, but they were told they could not smoke until after the deliberations were complete. Did you hear that?
Yes, ma'am.
Including the business about the smokers?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Number 10, I had questions about Mr. Murdaugh's guilt, but voted guilty because I felt pressured by the other jurors. Is that an accurate statement about your verdict?
Yes, ma'am.
After the verdict and immediately before sentencing, Ms. Hill pressured the jury to speak as a group to reporters from a television show. Is that an accurate statement of what she said?
Yes, ma'am.
And did some jurors decline to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, looks like we're back with a Troconis trial. Let's get back to that.
Weather underground for that time to determine that there weren't any storms in the
Hang on, are we on the right day?
of Farmington, West Hartford, correct?
So I used weather underground for 1 o'clock, 12:59, to determine that there was, to find out if there was precipitation.
On May 24th between 12 and 1, correct?
Good
Correct,
question.
and this is 11:58.
Well, this is May 23rd, right?
Correct.
All right, so it's 12, just before midnight on the 24th, correct?
Correct.
And you said that the weather underground that you used was from Brainerd Airport, right?
Yes,
Now, Brainerd Airport is the old city airport in Hartford along the Connecticut River, right?
yes,
Now, Bradley Airport is the big Connecticut airport up in Windsor.
So you may remember that Michelle Troconis said she, on the night before the murders, at around about midnight, she got into bed, I think, with her daughter, or she was in the same bedroom as her daughter, because there were thunderstorms. Funny enough, out of the blue, we had really bad thunderstorms here, like just incredible blitzkrieging, not for very long, for about 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, and so that's where she was. And so the defense lawyer is asking about the weather data, whether that was accurate. I don't think they believe that that is where she was. Now, it's possible that that night she was up late planning a murder for first thing the next morning. It's possible.
Bradley, would looking at a document perhaps refresh your recollection? I just have this marked for, well, I'm going to show it to you first. See if this might refresh your recollection. I realize it's little, but you have glasses on.
Yeah.
You can read it, all right.
Sharon, they are with their grandmother, Gloria Farber, as far as I know.
yes, does refresh my record.
So in looking at, that at Bradley Airport, there were thunderstorms in the area, including heavy thunderstorms that early morning of between 12 and 1 a.m., right?
Can I look at that one more time?
Welcome, Paula. Welcome.
Thank you. It is small.
It is small.
So would you say this lady over here is the court clerk for this case, this lady?
You had a chance, and I'll mark this for ID, please. That would be
M.
M as in Mary. ID. So having reviewed that, does that help refresh your recollection that between 12 and 1, there were in the area of winds of Bradley International Airport, heavy thunderstorms
There was a spike in the precipitation, yes,
right around that time, correct?
correct.
And just the kind of thing maybe a 12-year-old might get frightened of at 12 or 1 in the morning, being woken up.
Judge.
Well, sustained.
Each time that you met with Michelle Troconis, you continued to gather information concerning your investigation, correct?
Correct.
When I say you, I don't mean just you. I mean entire squads and teams of investigators, right?
That's correct.
You were working in conjunction with the New Canaan Police.
So one thing I would want to look at, I don't know whether this is really such a big deal, but one thing I would want to look at is the little girl's bedroom. I mean, that house is like a castle. Is that bedroom really so exposed to the thunder or the lightning? What side of the window, what side of the house did it likely come from? And really, was the sound coming like straight into the house? I would imagine that it's got pretty good walls and windows and all that sort of thing. It would be just quite interesting to know that.
Right?
Correct.
You had, at the time you were talking with Ms. Troconis on the first occasion in June 2nd of 2019, you had at that point already the benefit of some phone records, right?
Yes,
You had Mr. DULOS's phone records, right?
we had Mr. Dulos's phone, the Cellbrite report from his physical handset, yes.
And Cellbrite is a program, right? Isn't that what that is? You're calling it Cellbrite. We're not talking about Celebrite as like celebrate. It's a computer program, right?
Yes,
And it's used to be able to open up and look at things that are on a phone, a cell phone, right?
yes,
You can look at phone calls, right?
yes,
If they exist still, text messages,
yes,
internet searches,
yes.
photographs that have been taken with that.
Okay, so we quite familiar with that. You had the same thing come up in the Chris Watts case, came up in the Patrick Frazee case. I think it's come up in the Barry Morphew case. Comes up in pretty much any case, phone data review. It is interesting how, for example, what's happening now in the Murdaugh case, you can have an entire sort of body of the case, the whole structure, the whole thing thrown aside on a small little detail. And I'm having a similar. I actually thought my insurance was sorted out in terms of I took out COVID insurance, I got COVID, I claimed for insurance, they were going to pay me out. And then I held out for a little bit extra because I was in isolation for a little bit longer. And then because I said that I may have had something that may have compromised my immunity, and that's why I had COVID worse than, let's say, most people. they took that to mean I did have something. I knew I had something, and I was supposed to disclose that, right? And so, just on that little chance statement, where I was speculating, in hindsight, to say maybe I had this worse than average. They took that to mean first of all that I knew that I had something, that I was supposed to disclose it, and and then when I provided a doctor's thing saying that I didn't, they said, well, you misled us by implying that you did have something, and it all came down to the word prior. Did I have this thing just before that I said I could have had, or did I have it before? Did I have it just before, or did I have it before? It's on a simple thing like that, a single word, that a case can be decided. And if there is bias, you can see how just on the basis of that word, you could decide what that word means, right? It's quite crazy.
Some information, correct?
Yes.
And some of the information that you shared with her turned out to be inaccurate. Isn't that true?
Fair to say yes.
As a detective, we started to get into this, but I wanted to explore this a little more. You have actually been trained in investigative techniques, right?
Yes.
At least when dealing with adult suspects, adult witnesses, you are allowed to make up stuff, aren't you? To them.
Yes.
You're allowed to provide false information as a means of trying to elicit information from that individual, right?
Yes, correct.
So, for example, it's not in this case, but if you had told a suspect that someone else was confessing against them, you would be hoping that would elicit that person to say, oh, it wasn't me, I was just the standby, it was that other person. Isn't that a regular technique that's used?
Yes.
And sometimes if you have two people in custody at the same time, you have one detective saying the same thing to that other person, seeing who's going to talk first, right?
Yep. Yes.
Now, as I understand it, at the same time that when Ms. Troconis was placed in custody, Mr. DULOS was at the station, the New Canaan Police Station, for some of that same time, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
He was then transported elsewhere after processing, right? He
Yes.
didn't stay there.
That's correct.
But Ms. Troconis stayed at the New Canaan Police Station, right?
Yes.
She was kept in a cell.
Remember, you refer to that
Yes.
as a
for the next
ruse.
morning
Let's see if he does it
until the
again.
next afternoon.
Yes.
When you told Michelle Troconis that you had information that there were 30 stops along Albany Avenue disposing of garbage, you have conceded in a question to Mr. McGinnis that that was inaccurate, right? It wasn't a true statement, was it?
It was inaccurate. You're correct. It was an inaccurate statement.
Someone had told you that it was 30, or was that just a technique to come up with a number?
No, I was provided information that it was.
But you don't know who it was that told you that?
No, I don't recall specifically.
But you did actually swear in an affidavit that it was 30 stops, didn't you?
Yes.
So you at least thought it enough to swear to something under oath, even though it turned out to be untrue, right?
That's correct.
And you later corrected that in a supplemental report, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
You also told Ms. Troconis that you knew that Fotis Doulos was down in New Canaan in the morning of May 24th, 2019. You remember saying that in that first video, June 2nd?
Trying to remember whether I said that or whether we said that we both believe she was not being honest with us.
Well, I want to be more specific. Didn't you say?
So what is he trying to do? The defense lawyer here, John Shunon, is trying to undermine this witness. So either his client is guilty, dishonest, unreliable, or this officer is. Either the officer, in other words, if the officer is dishonest, unreliable, inaccurate, then his client comes out looking better, put it that way, right? So the bad guy, let's put it into kind of kindergarten terms. If he can show that the officer is the bad guy in the story, that the officer manipulated her, that the officer found inaccuracies in her statements that weren't inaccurate, for example, the weather, then it means that he's biased, and his honesty then comes into question, not hers, right?
The DNA exam that had been done by the lab at that point?
Which DNA done?
The state forensic lab DNA results down in New Canaan that suggested there was some DNA, a small amount of DNA found on the faucet and maybe a doorknob.
Yes.
That's what you were understanding, what was being suggested to Miss Troconis at that moment, correct?
That's correct.
Now, there were no fingerprints of Mr. DULOS down inside that house, were there, found?
No.
In fact, the only fingerprints you were aware of turned out to belong to one of the New Canaan police officers.
So that's true. I don't think they found his fingerprints, but I think they did find his blood on a faucet in the kitchen. And I think, well, I'm not saying it was definitely his blood, but a high probability. And then also a high probability on was it the toothbrush upstairs as well. The other thing is we've seen how many 2 pairs of gloves in this case. So would you expect to see fingerprints? So he's trying to raise doubt. He's trying to muddy the issue. He's trying to make the cop out to be dishonest, right? And Desert Cat says, I agree. I think she's had more to do with this than I first thought. Liesl, good to see you here. Liesl, I actually feel like I need to ask you something with regard to my battle with an insurance company. I just sort of wonder whether I must continue to waste time. Maybe I should email you something. You must let me know, hopefully, because I know you're a lawyer. Maybe you can give me some legal advice. Tegan says, well, they can't just ask her because she's got to be prepared to go on the stand. So, that's the roundabout route that they're taking.
Do you remember saying to her, or maybe it was Detective Clappy, well, that's not important, that's not relevant?
I don't remember that.
So I want to come back to what I showed you right at the beginning. If you think about it in a very simple way, the day that the mistress's rival, this person that's, I guess, responsible in her mind for this nightmare that's been going on for 2 years, the same day that she is murdered, the same day that she disappears, Michelle is in a vehicle with a murderer getting rid. I'm not saying she's getting rid of evidence. I'm also not saying she's not getting rid of evidence, simply that she's with the person who murdered her and he's getting rid of evidence. I don't know if one can easily minimize that. Like, no matter what spin you put on it, I don't know if you can easily minimize that. I would say that the odd show or the preponderance of what one feels was happening is the pendulum is swinging towards guilt, but you need something more specific to say, well, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not just accessory, it's conspiracy. And then the question is, does the alibi script do that in terms of an alibi script that has the part about disposing of evidence excised out of that? Now think about it. If you, as Michelle has been saying, she had no idea that what was going on. She had no idea that it was anything of evidentiary value. Well, if you had no idea, why did you leave it out of your script, right? Is that believable? Is that plausible?
The crime scene.
Right.
So
But
we,
you know a lot about transfer DNA. You've learned about transfer DNA, right?
yeah,
You
yes.
knew it was a minor, not a major amount of the combined DNA on that faucet, right?
Subject, Judge. I think it's hearsay.
Well, the question now goes to this witness's knowledge about transfer DNA and amounts. And so
Ask the daughter.
the question is, you know about,
I'm not sure if the daughter's available, and I don't know if the daughter is a state's witness. Can't imagine that she is.
Question, Counselor.
Well, you understood that there was a minor and a major contributor, that is more than one person's DNA mixed together on that faucet, right? You knew that at that point.
I understood that there was more than one person mixed together.
You also knew, when you're questioning Michelle Troconis at that point, that you knew that Fotis Doulos had been there at a picnic out in the backyard a day and a half earlier than May 24th, right? On the 22nd.
Outside of the house, yes.
Right, but there was food, right? You knew that.
Mhm. Yes,
There was
yes,
silverware and plates and all that stuff, right?
yes.
And you were aware that for part of that time, Jennifer Doulos and Fotis Doulos had interacted during that event at the house down in New Canaan, right?
Yes,
You also told Michelle Troconis that she would have to know what happened to Jennifer Doulos, right?
yes.
Was that because she was living with Fotis Doulos that you said that?
Partially,
Was it because she was dating him at the time?
partially.
Do you think that from what you had already told us about what you had learned about Fotis Doulos, that he was finally revealing his true self to this girlfriend?
Just gonna object, Judge.
ground.
Speculation, form.
I'm asking what he believed and thought
It's
during the
irrelevant.
questioning.
It's also irrelevant.
Well, if the court is to credit counsel's representation,
Okay, so just this is a little example of thinking critically. Let me ask you a question. Do you think Michelle Troconis's fingerprints have been found on the black garbage bags? Someone actually just mentioned that. I don't know what STS is, but someone just mentioned that. Let's hear it from you guys. Do you think Michelle Troconis's, right? So Stephanie says yes, Slim says yes, Sharon says yes, Mel Stiller says yes. So what is your source for that? I know you say it's very likely, but what's your source for that? I know it seems likely and logical, but what's your source for that? Yeah, so another YouTube channel is not a source. So if you Google, and I'm not saying that this is a absolute source either, but if you Google Michelle Troconis fingerprints, why is it doing that? Then it doesn't say anything about that. Michelle Troconis fingerprints, even if you take that away, they look for fingerprints on the alibi scripts. I don't see anything about fingerprints on black bags. I would imagine if it's that simple and that obvious, it would be in a search like this. So as far as I'm concerned, there isn't any as far as I'm aware.
Times, isn't that right?
I didn't count them, but that sounds accurate.
Does sound accurate.
Does sound accurate.
Stephanie says she'll
Michelle
find,
just didn't tell
let's have
you
a
that
look.
she didn't know. She offered to help you search, didn't she?
In those words, she did, yes.
Well, she did more than just words. Didn't she say she would dig holes? Isn't that one of the things she
She did
said?
say that, yes.
And she would trek through the woods, right?
In the interview, yes. Yes.
She drew some pictures for you, which I believe we see on the screen where you're on June 6th, where she's showing you some pictures, right?
Yes,
You looked at those pictures, didn't you?
yes.
And I'm gonna again ask that exhibit L, if I could have the images, please. The drawings.
Now, I must say, I was under the impression that this guy was gonna play back testimony, play back interrogation tapes, and he doesn't seem to have done that so far. Is he going to? It'll be interesting. He seems to be more interested in what the officer said that he can challenge than what his client said. So far, anyway.
2581 on exhibit L. And I'm just gonna have you can see it in front of you there, right?
Yes, I can.
Hi,
So this
Murphy, good
shows,
to
this
see
is
you.
a drawing that Mr. Troconis said she drew, right? He gave to you, right?
Yes,
It shows Jefferson Crossing, right?
correct.
It shows Eli Road here.
Yes,
It shows Old Mountain Road, right?
yes,
And she drew pictures of the various properties in the immediate area that Mr. DULOS owned through the Ford Group, correct?
correct.
She even talked about properties that she referred to as Mr. Godfrey, that is property he wanted to develop, isn't that right, on Old Mountain Road down the street here?
Yes,
And then this is Mountain Spring Road here, correct?
yes,
So other than the short jog, there's a jog from Eli Road to Mountain Spring Road. There's a stop sign here and there's a stop sign there, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And it's just maybe about 50 feet from Eli Road to Mountain Road, right?
I don't know the footage, but
You were only there a couple of times, I take it.
correct, I'm not
Okay.
that familiar with it.
But then she also talked about you pass another through road called Talcott. It's actually
Notch.
Talcott Notch Road,
Talcott
right?
Notch Road, correct.
So you may remember that I said I'd be very interested to know if there were fingerprints, fibers, DNA on the sticky side of those number plate, or of the number plate, of the license plate. And I've felt, what is the probability? Did PHOTOS do that? Bear in mind there were six letters or numbers that were altered. That's quite a lot. That's quite a lot of tape that's used. In other words, quite a lot of opportunity to leave behind fibers, DNA, fingerprints. And so no one's spoken about that. That doesn't mean there isn't any, but one would think if they had that evidence, they'd be waving it around by now, wouldn't they?
The property along it's like the reservoir, the water company property, correct?
MDC, correct.
Yeah, MDC, for the people that live down this part of the state, means Metropolitan District Commission, right?
Correct.
They're the quasi-public water utility company that owns thousands of acres of land
Over
up in
6,000.
Hartford and Litchfield
Correct.
counties, right?
Yes,
And that's the source of multiple reservoirs that feed the entire Hartford area, right?
correct.
So she drew these pictures.
Okay, so we're going to look at a article that Stephanie's highlighted, everything we learned from the horrific warrant. And so we specifically looking for things about fingerprints. DNA and fingerprints on evidence discarded, implicating Fotis and Michelle Troconis. Let's have a look at that. So plastic garbage bags taped together. DNA has Michelle Troconis on it. That's really interesting. Can you guys see that? This one over here. Plastic garbage bags taped together with black tape. DNA matched to Michelle Troconis. So that's one reference to Michelle Troconis. And I think there's one again at the bottom here. Swabbing of bag opening and separate bag portion. DNA matched to Michelle Troconis. Swabbing of bag opening. So that's a portion of the bag. It seems like the rim of the bag. It's quite amazing. You've got all three DNAs present in the same place. And I do think that that is quite fairly strong evidence. But there's nothing here, as far as I can see, about fingerprints. Let's see if I've missed something. It could be evidence of DNA and bloodstains found at Jennifer DULOS' New Canaan home. So I'm just looking for something to do with fingerprints. When pressed on whether, let's just go through that. When pressed on whether DULOS was home that morning, Troconis admitted, okay, so maybe he wasn't home the entire morning. She continued to provide DULOS with an alibi from 6:40 until 8:15 a.m. When asked to clarify if DULOS was home, she did not answer the question. Instead, she immediately began telling investigators what she had been doing by saying, all my morning he was in the house. I have texts. Okay. I'm still looking for, sorry, I would think that there would be a reference to fingerprints if there were. I still don't seem to see that. What does Stephanie say? Stephanie, there we go. But that's kind of my point, is someone had said fingerprints, and I'm saying definitely not fingerprints. There are quite a few gloves in this thing. Anyway. Can you see how one can easily, because you have a belief and kind of a bias, you can imagine something to be true because it makes sense and it supports what you believe anyway, but it doesn't mean it is accurate.
That showing her with a razor or a electric razor or a straight razor or anything, right? Doing that.
Video surveillance? No.
No, you were.
So, I mean, the showing you guys that it's not meant to be nasty. It's not meant to be, I told you so. It's not meant to be, I'm wrong, I'm right and you're wrong or whatever. It's just meant to show it's important to think critically. So, you know, where someone says they found fingerprints, my first thought is, yes, that makes sense. But my second thought is, I don't believe I've seen anything with regard to that. And that seems to be significant evidence that no one seems to have talked about. And that seems unlikely. And so, as I say, when you Google it, you would think that the media who are covering this would be aware of it, if it was something to be aware of. Having said that, it's interesting that they haven't really spoken about her DNA being on the garbage bags. I certainly learned that. I didn't know that until now. But that is the legacy of thinking critically, is you find out for certain what you know and what you don't know. You know, you follow up, you make sure.
Michelle told you there had been a dinner party, didn't she?
Yes.
She named the people who were at that party, didn't she?
Yes.
She told you about Stefan Reich, right?
Correct.
And his girlfriend, Beth Johnson, right?
Yes.
She told you that Stefan Reich was one of Mr. DULOS's or the Four Group real estate agents, right?
With Coldwell Banker, yes.
What's that?
With Coldwell Banker, yes.
Yes, but one of the agents that worked on.
Now, what's kind of striking with that DNA report is it doesn't seem to show DNA or any evidence on the inside of that tape. That's certainly, I don't know if that's comprehensive. I don't know if it's exhaustive. I don't know if it's the whole thing. But from what it is showing, it seems to be other. I mean, they did find evidence on the back of tape, looks like, but not that tape, which is quite interesting.
Well, the question is essentially,
Hi, Wendy.
you confirmed them. That's the question, overruled.
Right?
They were confirmed by other, yes, they were confirmed.
Okay.
So I suppose you could ask, could there be an innocent reason for Michelle Troconis' DNA to be there? And I think you could say, on the one hand, that they lived together, but on the other hand, like it's quite a personal, intimate, crucial, critical thing, a garbage bag that's been taped, a garbage bag that's associated with a crime. You would think that if Fotis was keeping it a complete secret and he uses a poncho in terms of collecting evidence and cleans up the way that he did, that he would make sure he did that aspect nowhere near Michelle Troconis. On the other hand, perhaps you could argue that he simply asked Michelle, hi, Michelle, are there any more garbage bags in the house? And Michelle said, here, and gave him one, and that's why her DNA is there. Is that likely? That's possible. Is it probable?
She's told you that one of the reasons she thought Fotis was up in the office that morning when she got back is because she saw Attorney Kempmawini in the office, right?
So Stephanie says, I thought they took the garbage bags from under Jennifer's sink. I think that's correct. But I don't know whether absolutely all of the garbage bags came from there. I have a feeling there was additional cleaning up that went on, and thus additional garbage bags. But I can't say for sure. I know there were smaller garbage bags. I'm not sure where they came from. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. What's going on?
She was there because she saw Ken. Didn't she correct herself?
Change your story or her account, yes.
Well, you can call it change, correct, whichever, but she eventually told you that she didn't actually see him in the office. But
So I just want to talk about these terms. Possible in a legal sense is that exactly that, is that it is possible. It's not impossible, right? Possible means that it could have potentially happened, right? Possible means that it's not impossible that X or Y happened. So even though it might be unlikely, even though it might be unproven, even though it might be unreasonable, even though it might be against someone's character or pattern of behavior, it's possible, right? And so if you ask the question, was it possible that Michelle Troconis was at Jennifer DULOS's home when she was murdered? What do you think the answer is? Let me ask that again. Was it possible that Michelle Troconis was at the home while Jennifer DULOS was being murdered? What do you guys say to that? It's not really that anything is possible. Not anything is possible. Is it possible that Michelle Troconis was in Venezuela when this happened? No, it's not possible. It's impossible. It's not possible. It's not anything is possible. I don't think it is possible that she was at the home because she took her daughter to school. Remember, that is exactly what Jennifer DULOS had done, taken her daughter to school. And then I think her phone data will likely show that she was somewhere else. If it was possible, let me say this again, if it was possible that Michelle Troconis was at the home, then you would think the state would be focused on that. They would be trying to show that she was there. And I don't think her vehicle goes anywhere near there. I don't think she does. I suppose you could, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, likely her cell phone records probably show that it's impossible, meaning she was somewhere else, certainly that her phone was somewhere else. Also, how could she have gotten to the house if there were cameras around there and photos got there on a bicycle? How could she have gotten there in some other way? I suppose you could say she jogged there. So I suppose you could argue, if you really wanted to argue, I suppose you could say it is possible. I would say it's improbable and very likely impossible. But probable means that it is likely, not. And so there's a difference between possible and probable. Possible means that that it is not impossible. Probable means that it is, the circumstances are showing that it is more likely. And of course, probable isn't enough to prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You can't say, although it's possible Michelle Troconis was involved, even if it's probable that she was involved, that's not enough to convict her. She's got to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Does that make sense? But I do think it's quite an interesting question if you say, could Michelle have been there? I don't think that's at all part of the state's case. But just because you can't prove she wasn't there doesn't mean that she was there. It's a kind of a little bit like Nicole Kessinger. Just because you can't absolutely prove that she wasn't there doesn't mean she was there.
See if this refreshes your recollection. Don't read it out loud, just
Nope,
read it to
I won't.
yourself.
So I think the strongest evidence I've seen so far are those alibi scripts. I mean, have you ever participated in an alibi script with anybody who murdered somebody? It would be interesting to know when those scripts were written. To me, the best evidence is going to be cell phone evidence if they have it. If they don't have it, what on earth are we going to be talking about for the next 4 weeks?
Don't recall seeing it, but I've just read it.
Well, did it refresh?
Another aspect that I find very compelling is Michelle Troconis' motive. When you just look at the fact that the divorce was so contentious, so acrimonious, that she had to go and stay someone else every weekend, that to me would make a lot of people pretty upset. The fact that Michelle Troconis is a very expressive, emotional person, but also expressive, not like just emotional, very emotional, not just expressive, very expressive, is interesting. I don't know if that's enough to take you across that line.
By Bluetooth at 3:58 in the afternoon on the 24th of May. The response was there was no memory of that. Counsel then refreshed recollection. The witness said he's read it. He doesn't remember receiving that document. And now
the other thing with the alibi script is, if you ask me, it's written in retrospect. It's written after the fact, not before the fact. And to some extent, that is mitigating in terms of conspiracy. In terms of accessory, it's, I would say, aggravating.
Yes, Judge, and also relies on hearsay information.
I'd like to address this hearsay question.
Well, the question is,
Yeah,
really,
it
this
is.
is the basic question. Did you discuss that information with anybody else who was involved in the investigation? That seems to be the question.
It has to do with when he's asking and making statements, the two of them, because who says what, they're both together, are speaking to Ms. Troconis, and they're telling her certain information, and they're not telling her certain information. I'm just eliciting that this was a piece of information they'd had for at least several days.
And the objection is facts, not in evidence. Again, the court sees the basic question as this. As the court understands the offer, if this is the information that you had concerning the Bluetooth connection, did you discuss that at the June 2nd interview with Michelle Troconis? That's how the court hears the offer.
Through the use of the term science, unquote.
Well, that makes the question confusing. The court would sustain the objection if that's the question.
And that was the question, Your Honor.
So the objection is sustained.
All right, I'll ask a different question. Did you discuss with Ms. Troconis that you had information about the connection of the Farber-DULOS cell phone to her Suburban, that is to the Farber-Dulos Suburban down in New Canaan, late in the, approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon on May 24th with Ms. Troconis. Did you discuss that with her?
I don't know that that's Jennifer's phone that connected.
You don't know that because you need to see the entire lab report?
Off the top of my head, I don't know which phone that is.
Right. But
So another thing that I feel aggravates the case against Michelle Troconis is on the day that Jennifer Dulos disappears, on the day that something catastrophic happens, her daughter is absent the whole day. Her daughter is uncharacteristically busy with a show that happens until 9 o'clock. And I can't help thinking that's very convenient, given what happened that day, isn't it?
from the lab regarding the cell phone connection, yes or no?
Yes.
But you don't know
Yeah.
if it's what the report told you is in fact Jennifer Farber-Dulos's phone is what you're saying, right?
As I sit here today, that's correct.
Okay, we'll deal with that with a different witness. By the way, again, getting back to this question of the DNA, did you talk to the court supervisor who was present at the house on May 22nd with Mr. Dulos?
Yes.
So you were aware that he was there that night, right? This 22nd.
On the 22nd, yes.
That he was playing basketball with his kids, right?
Yes.
You were aware that he'd given chocolate to his wife?
Judge, I'm just going to object, Your Honor. All of this is hearsay information, and the defense is offering this to prove the truth.
Okay, so someone was saying something about retrospect being very telling. If you think about the Ramsey ransom note, when do you think the Ramsey ransom note was written? Now, the one school of thought is that it was written by a family member and thus written in retrospect, written knowing the end result and then trying to stage things in a different way. And I personally think that this is what's happened in terms of the alibi scripts here, knowing what the end result is, knowing to some extent what their movements were already, and then trying to stage them in terms of statements and so on. The crazy thing about the Ramsey ransom note is that the intruder theory suggests that some intruder, this is actually what the ex-FBI profiler John Douglas seems to think, is that someone literally wrote a 3-page ransom note prior to even going into the house, prior to doing anything. And in that thing said something about killing JonBenet, that she would be beheaded and that you will be denied her remains, when apparently at that time the person hadn't even seen JonBenet because they hadn't come back from the whole thing. In other words, was already contemplating killing her, I guess, after the fact, which doesn't seem like the way a kidnapper would think about it. A kidnapper would say, I've got your daughter, I'll contact you at this time, here's the money that I want. He wouldn't be thinking about it any further. He'd write it before the time, and then he would post the amount. On the other hand, if you think about the Charlotte Cena case, that was written after the fact. I mean, if you think about the risk of writing a ransom note, leaving it behind, and then committing the crime, it runs the risk of all of that. You leave behind evidence of a crime perhaps you don't end up committing, and then you're in trouble anyway. But that's, I mean, the thing as well. Why leave behind a ransom note for kidnapping you didn't actually perpetrate?
22nd of May, doesn't that suggest that his DNA could be found somewhere? The court sees no reason for the litany of questions leading up to that. So at this point, the court's going to sustain the objection. But the question, the court would allow.
So without getting into any of the specifics, you were aware that he interacted with his family on May 22nd down at 69 Wells Lane, correct?
Correct,
On May 22nd.
correct.
And you had no proof other than your opinion or speculation that Fotis Doulos was not in his house at 4 Jefferson Crossing at 6:40 in the morning, correct? And I say as of that date.
Right, no, I understand. That's correct.
What we're going to do right now, it's 11:25. We'll take our morning recess until 11:40. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not discuss the case. Thank you.
Notice the color that she's wearing. It's a very subdued color. She's not dressed in red or bright blue.
All rise. This honorable security court now stands in recess. You may exit the courtroom.
It's almost the color maybe a librarian would use, right? She's trying to be understated in a dress code, in a dress sense, right? Okay, so I'm also going to take a break. I don't know whether I'm going to cover the whole day. Certainly, if it's going to be the defense story, then I'm not sure if I want to. I'm not particularly interested in it. I'm interested to know what the evidence is that law enforcement have and the prosecution. So we'll see what happens after the break. I was looking forward to Pavel Gumeni testifying. Hopefully that happens today. But if it's going to be at the end of the court session, I'm not sure if I'm going to be awake to cover it. It's 6:25 here, and I've got to get some sleep at some point. I know I may seem superhuman, but I definitely am not. Yeah. So I'm going to take a break, and at the same time, I'm going to contact Liesel. I'm going to send you 2 emails just to get your thoughts on this battle that I'm having with my insurer. I don't know whether I'm not seeing something or whether they are being extremely crooked and mischievous. I also would like your advice on whether I should just stop going through the processes as they suggest them and just go straight to a lawyer, and because it ends up being like with a lawyer, you can tell them your thing and get everything, all the cards on the table very quickly, and then they can see the legal aspect also very quickly. Whereas it seems like this is a long drawn out game of fainting and this and that. So I'm going to contact you with that. Just a little thing on a personal note, a friend of mine, not really a friend, someone that I knew a long time ago, I found out that she died over the weekend. So if you're wondering why I didn't do a live, I was going to do a live on Scott Peterson. I just was a little saddened and by that. So yeah, I might talk to you guys about that at a later stage. Okay, so I'll see you guys a little bit later.
I think they were, I don't know if the Pavlonis were buying 80 or 88. So I know that the Pavlonis were spoken to by another detective at some point.
Well, do you recall that the prospective buyer wanted to build a house, but wanted to tour 80 Mountain Spring because it was more or less completed, as to see what kind of house Mr. DULOS could build for them? Does that ring a
Yes.
bell?
Subject, judge calls for hearsay.
I'm not offering for the truth. It doesn't matter whether they were going to build a house.
Court does not hear the question as being offered for the truth overruled.
You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Even, we've seen some pictures of 80 Mountain Spring. It also was a fairly large house, right?
Yes.
It looks like it may have been an old house that had been gutted and rebuilt and made maybe way bigger than the original house.
Yes.
We see there's actually ivy growing up on the brick, right?
Correct.
Brand new house couldn't have that much ivy growing that fast, right?
True.
She told you that she had gone and cleaned the house with photos before, right?
Twice before, yes.
And we're talking about dusting. I mean, we're not talking about scrubbing bathtubs and stuff, right?
She said clean.
It was an empty house, right?
Yes.
You've been in that house, right?
Yes.
It was dusty a little bit, wasn't it?
Yes.
There was still construction debris in there, especially in the basement, wasn't quite finished, right?
Yes.
She told you she brought garbage bags over, right?
Yes, she did.
The large black garbage bags, right?
Yes.
She also told you she brought in a mop, right? Dust mop,
Swiffer?
Swifter.
Yes.
Remember, she couldn't remember.
So, first of all, sorry that I missed, I think, quite a few minutes, 7 minutes, I think. Was the break only about 15 minutes? But it sounds like they are doing the whole plausible deniability thing, that this was someone who cleaned before. And so that's, so it's plausible that, the fact that she was cleaning is no big deal, I guess, on this critical day of all days.
And it wasn't a surprise to you, was it, that Michelle was saying that Fotis and she would sometimes tidy up before a showing, right?
I don't know that I knew that, no. I don't know.
Learn that from other employees?
On the second?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the Murdaugh trial, I was just watching some of that. It's on a long break, about 2.5 hours, I think, till 1:15. The clerk will be taking the stand, so we'll try and catch some of that if I can stay on the ball.
So the question is, or concerns, cleaning up at one of the properties. The objection, counsel.
So my objection is hearsay, Your Honor. He's indicating that he's not offering it for its truth, Judge. I think at some point.
Thanks a lot, Murphy. Thank you.
The value of just continuously offering statements where there's a real danger of bootstrapping them for the truth. At some point, the scale tips, Judge. And my concern is that the defense is essentially trying to prove certain facts through hearsay information. They're claiming it's not for its truth. And that's my objection, is that at some point, scale tips.
Well, the court hears this question as being offered for the truth. So sustained.
Michelle told you in that interview that he had asked her to come help clean, right?
Yes.
And that was not anything that that contradicted any other information you had, correct? From any other employee, right?
Correct.
You also knew, I guess on May 31st, there was a, what I'd call a trash pull at Fort Jefferson Crossing. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So you knew that Fridays was trash pickup day in that part of Farmington. Isn't that true?
Yes.
It was also the same thing down at 80 Mountain Spring, right?
I don't know that.
Nobody
80.
did a trash pull or looked to see if there was a garbage can out on Friday, May 31st?
Judge, again, I just object. It's calling for hearsay.
Well, the question, as the court hears it, is, do you know if there was a trash pull at 80 Mountain Spring or any other property?
So I think what could have improved the chances of POTUS getting away with this, and also Michelle not being in the position she's in now, is if they had known the day that the trash was being collected, like Chris Watts knew it was being collected from the Saratoga Trail neighborhood in Frederick on the Tuesday, then, in other words, if they'd known the trash was going to be collected, let's say they knew the day that that was going to happen, they could have then disposed of the trash earlier that same day, or perhaps the day before. And I think that would have made it much harder. On the other hand, if they hadn't disposed of the trash and the police were already suspicious and looking at them, then who knows? Maybe they would have been caught out with trash on their property. Oh, excuse me.
Dang.
Could you explain what a garbage pull is? You indicated there was one at 40 Jefferson Crossing. What is that?
Sustained.
She also told you what cars were down at 80 Mountain Spring Road that she recalled on May 24th. Isn't that right?
She reported some of the vehicles that were there. Yes.
She mentioned the Suburban, right?
She mentioned, yes.
She mentioned the Jeep.
The Jeep Cherokee, yes.
She mentioned Pavel's Tacoma,
Which interview are we speaking of?
either the first or the second.
She mentioned Pavel's Tacoma at the end of the first interview.
Okay.
That
She brought it up on her own, right?
yes.
You didn't ask her about the Tacoma, did you? Before she brought it up.
No.
She was asked more general, is there anything else you want to tell us? And she said, well, Pavel Gumieni drives a Tacoma, right?
We asked her if there were any questions she had for us.
That's right. And she mentioned in that about the Tacoma, right?
Yes.
And she also mentioned that at some point, Pavel showed up in the Raptor, right?
Yes, correct.
At 80 Mountain Spring.
Correct.
She also told you that she had brought a vacuum down to do a little vacuuming, right?
On the first trip, yes.
But it didn't work because the house didn't have central vac, right?
That's correct.
So she had to go back and get the other item, the Swifter or mop or whatever,
She went back to get a broom.
a broom. Okay. She told you also, didn't she, that she didn't really want to be doing cleaning, right?
Yes, she said that in the second interview.
She also told you that different people from the company drove different vehicles at different times, right?
Could you ask that question?
Yeah, that sometimes Pavel would drive the Jeep, right?
Yes, correct.
Sometimes he would drive the Suburban.
Pavel did not drive the Suburban.
Well, I'm saying, didn't Michelle say sometimes he did?
She said that Pavel did not drive the Suburban.
Drove the Raptor.
Raptor, yes.
Okay, Raptor's the Ford pickup truck that we've seen, right?
That's correct.
And you were able to review Ring doorbell surveillance down around, across from 80 Mountain Spring Road, right?
Not Ring.
Or surveillance.
Surveillance,
home
yes.
surveillance. I'm using Ring as a sort of shorthand, but whether it's Ring or a different company, there was a video surveillance that the family that lived across the street from 80 Mountain Spring owned, right?
That's correct.
And we'll just say that the name of that family is Manafort, right?
Yes.
Okay. And without going to any of the specifics, you were able to review comings and goings, at least into the driveway of that 80 Mountain Spring Road property, right?
Yes.
Including the evening before on May 23rd, right?
That's correct.
But you couldn't see who was driving any of these vehicles, right?
Correct.
It's too far away and the angle was such, you can just see the vehicles coming and going, right?
Yes.
Now, you were also able to review some surveillance, whether it's Ring or a different company, from a house across the street from 4 Jefferson Crossing, right?
That's correct.
I think it's at 1 Jefferson Crossing.
That's correct.
Okay, so I just want to share just some thoughts again, going back to the Murdaugh trial, the retrial, the attempt to get an appeal. One of the last witnesses that I heard, last jurors that I heard being questioned by the judge, she said she wasn't influenced by the clerk. She said something about, I think also that she didn't hear anything that would influence her. And so the judge also afterwards said there's no right or wrong answer. Whatever you understood, whatever you witnessed is your truth. The part that I find legally relevant is the jurors were all asked, I think collectively, certainly, I'm not sure if they were all asked individually. I think they were all asked individually whether this is their verdict, and they said yes. And isn't that the full and final story with that? Can you come afterwards and say, actually, somebody influenced my thoughts? Can you say that afterwards? What do you think?
How long Abel worked for Fotis, but it was longer than he knew Michelle Troconis.
In other words, he was already working for
Thanks a lot, Al.
Mr.
Thank you.
DULOS when she even first came up to Connecticut, right?
That's correct.
You were also aware that when she was asked if he was involved, she said she doesn't know, she didn't think so, right?
Yes.
But she also used an interesting expression. She said, but she wouldn't hold her hand to the fire over it. Do you remember her saying words to that effect?
Yes.
Did you understand that to mean that she wouldn't swear to it?
Yes.
I think Van Gogh said the same thing, but in a different
She
way.
also told you that Pavel Gumieni had been down.
Van Gogh said something like, if I can hold my hand over this flame for a certain length of time, can I see my cousin for that length of time? Something like that.
Do you confirm there was a house under construction on a street in New Canaan?
Yes.
And you learned the address?
Yes.
You also learned there was a doorbell video from across the street that shined, at least from a distance, on that property.
Yes.
Again, that was motion activated, not continuous, or you don't?
I don't remember.
Let me just go back now to the discussion about Albany Avenue, right?
Okay.
You repeatedly went back to asking Michelle Troconis about Albany Avenue and what she was doing there. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And I want to be specific when there's only one time where you see Michelle admitting that, saying that, yeah, that's her. She leaned out and touched the sidewalk. Remember that?
Sorry, just to check, Your Honor, it's a vague question.
Yeah, I'll rephrase the question. In the videos which you had watched, right?
Yes.
And you showed her either from the video itself that we're watching, I can't tell if you're showing her a still image or a short video clip. Do you know which it was?
It would be a screenshot.
Okay. But she told you on at least 2 occasions what she was doing, right?
She told us she was leaning out. That's not what she was doing. She was stepping out.
Yeah. And didn't she tell you she was chewing gum? I took it, I spit it, my hand got sticky, and I went like this to clean, and she's moving her hand back and forth like a rubbing motion. You recall that?
I recall that, yes.
You remember like maybe an hour later, almost during the interrogation, you show her that photo again, and she says, that's me. I put my gum and I threw it and it was sticky. Right? When you're talking about the FedEx envelope and you're asking her about that, right? Remember her saying that?
Yes.
But at no time did she say she was picking stuff up off the sidewalk, though, did she?
In retrospect, no, but at the time, it was not clear to us what she was doing.
I mean, it wasn't clear to us. When I just read you what she said, we played that clip. She says, I took it, I spit it, my hand got sticky, and I went like this to clean it.
I don't know if she's referring to cleaning her hand or cleaning the sidewalk.
Okay. And
Yeah, I mean, who cleans their hands on the sidewalk?
point in time that was played the other day where Michelle and Attorney Bowman get up and leave the room and the video is still playing.
Yes.
I want to play that a little bit louder than it was played. If we can, just going to ask that that be played. I made it a little louder so we could hear this portion. And this is how, let me get the exact time for the record. It's cut off on the screen, so. 2:19 and 40 seconds.
Yeah, this one's 3 hours.
Yeah. Still red.
Still going?
Yeah. Still red. Red means.
Terry Dean, thanks for joining us. So one place I can't imagine wanting to touch is in South Korea. It's very normal for people to spit. You know, if the air is quite dirty, it's kind of normal to what's.
West Hartford. Why? If I was going to go around the city with Richie Colangelo because we wanted on a mission to dump all of our trash over city, I remember that for this time. It wouldn't just slip my mind. We're going to do what we're going to do. We're not.
Unless she's legitimately on the phone, talking and texting, and she's not paying attention.
Right. I mean,
And then
she's
when
outside the car, dropping us. She'd come with baby.
She was?
She's
She was outside.
She was open, her door was open. She's outside and reaching out the ground. Her story is that she dropped gum and she realized it was sticky. And she shut her door and had to pick up her gum when she dropped it. She's like one person in the world that ever gets her. So she, doesn't get missed. Maybe she is. But
I think she's a bit of self-preservation too.
yeah. Right, because she's thinking like, well. But it's a valid point, the Hartford thing wasn't on any of this. And sure, we had a press on our interview. And we did not find, until we showed her a picture. We didn't find any notes on the 22nd, which is what the attorney told her to recreate it. And he said Wednesday for focus. What we ended up finding was Friday and Saturday, both. Right, well, the Hartford's not in either. Why?
So it's quite interesting that the defense are using what the cops are saying off script, I guess, as part of their case.
Then we moved this phone home, but didn't think about, dumping the trash, leave this phone. Right. And then I believe, I just didn't think about that Starbucks to cover that cell tower area, but all, that's right, I don't think have. So that's why we're there. I mean, that's it, we were at this, we feel called down. No, it's oh, that's good. And just, we're still here, let's take it for a hike tomorrow. Let's go for a. Yeah, let's go for a, yeah, why not?
So what do you think about that West Hartford story?
But here's the thing, I mean, I think the county West Hartford, but here's the thing, I mean, honestly. She's great. You were great. What? You were talking about Harvard.
Yeah, another thing, I don't know if this helps in.
We stopped it at, I didn't know the time, but it's when Mr. Bowman and Michelle come right back in, right?
Correct.
So the person that was speaking off to the left that when I played this clip, that was State's Attorney Richard Colangelo, right?
The male voice, yes.
The male voice. The female voice, I think you already mentioned, was Detective Allison
Peters.
Mr. Colangelo said twice, she doesn't know. I don't think that she knows. Do you remember hearing him say that?
Yes.
And all three of you, almost in unison, but at least you can hear all three of you say that she was picking up her gum off the sidewalk.
Yes.
Now, she never used those words even under your interpretation that she was cleaning the sidewalk as opposed to her fingers, right?
If she's cleaning the sidewalk, she's picking up the gum. That was my impression.
Not that she had, her hand was sticky and she was cleaning it. You didn't assume that that's what she was talking about.
I wouldn't think she would clean her hand on a public sidewalk.
At the end, just before I shut it off, the last thing I hear Mr. Colangelo say is that she's great, or words to that effect. Right?
I didn't hear that.
You didn't hear that? Or she'll be great?
I didn't hear the word great.
Was the purpose of any of this conversation for her to be a witness against Fotis DULOS?
Object, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Well, this witness conducted the interview along with 3 other police personnel. The question is, was this interview designed to get Michelle Troconis to be a witness against Fotis DULOS? Overruled.
This interview was designed to obtain full information and truthful information for Michelle Troconis regarding what happened to a missing mother of 5.
So instead of answering my question, you answered that question. So you're saying it was not to have her become a witness? That was my question.
It's argumentative.
Overruled.
I don't know what the purpose was. I'm not, my purpose was to obtain the truth.
You don't know what the purpose of Mr. Colangelo was?
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, first, the scene has been set. State's Attorney Colangelo was in the interview room. This witness has testified as to what his purpose was in interviewing Michelle Troconis. The court understands his testimony to be to find out what happened to Jennifer Farber DULOS. The question now is, for what purpose, if you know, was State's Attorney Colangelo there?
Can you answer that question?
Well, overruled.
Did you ask the questions?
Sure. Did you know why the State's Attorney Colangelo was present,
No,
or what his purpose was?
no.
And just so that I'm clear about what happened.
So if you think about it, Michelle Troconis says that she spits gum into her hand, then her fingers get sticky with gum, and she then wipes the gum off her fingers on the sidewalk, effectively cleaning her hands on the sidewalk, right? But two things. First of all, we know that they're going to Starbucks. That would probably be a better place to do that with a napkin. Someone says here, I can't stand spitting, but wouldn't a easier way of getting rid of the gum have been just to spit it out? I mean, if somebody said to you, you've got two options here. The one option is you can put gum in your finger, but then you must open the car door and wipe your fingers off the sidewalk. That's option one. Option two is you can just roll down the window and spit the gum out. Obviously, both are pretty, not it's not very nice behavior from a vehicle passenger. But of the two, which one would you be more inclined to choose? Of the two, which would most people be more inclined to choose? And I mean, the vehicle stopped. All she's got to do is roll down the window and kind of, I don't know, spit the gum out, or just take it out of her mouth and throw it out the window.
Any bags when he comes back up? There were very few bags. So obviously he must have stopped somewhere in the interim.
Well, you just made that up, right? It's total speculation, isn't it?
Well,
Objection.
well,
Counsel asked a question, he got an answer.
well, the court is going to indicate what it heard. Were there two stops in the video? The answer was not a yes or a no. The answer was, I believe there were more stops. So
I would move that
the question, were there two stops in the video before the stop on Adams and Albany? The question was not answered, whether there were two stops before Albany and Adams.
May I ask that the non-responsive answer be stricken?
Well, if that's the witness's response, the jury heard it.
You have no other video that shows Mr. DULOS stopping his truck anywhere else and getting out. Isn't that true, sir?
That's not true.
Oh, you have more video that the jury hasn't seen. Is that what you're telling us?
Well, objection, Judge. How would this witness know what the jury has and hasn't seen?
Well, the question is, do you have other videos showing other than the three stops? The answer, the court understood it, is yes. The next question.
Have you shared that?
Well, no, the court is indicating what it has heard.
Right.
The next question was, have you shared, well, really the question is, have you shared that video with the state's attorney's office? That's the next question, because this witness wouldn't have the opportunity to share it with the jury.
Sorry, have you shared that, the other videos that you mentioned, with the state's attorney's office?
The state's attorney has the video from I believe, from the transit bus. That's where the footage is coming from.
Oh,
So
yes.
if I personally,
So it is quite a interesting and certainly legally significant question is, how many other stops were there? how many other disposals could there have been? So they found footage of some of the disposals on camera, 2 at least, 3 if you count the disposal into the sewage drain. Is there any more? And I think the answer has to be there has to be more, because what happened to all the blood evidence? What happened to Jennifer's body, for goodness sake? Oh shit, what have I done? Sorry, let's try and get back to that. Sorry about that.
In Hartford.
I'm not familiar with the geography of.
You're aware that it's a major thoroughfare from the suburbs west of Hartford into Hartford, right?
Yes.
Stephanie, is your husband doing okay?
By the way, these garbage cans were on street corners, right?
Correct.
We see traffic going back and forth in the videos.
Yes.
You see pedestrians.
Yeah, that's right.
They were in plain sight, weren't they? The receptacles, garbage receptacles.
Yes.
I'm not sure if the transit bus captured more trash runs, but I know the transit bus captured additional footage. So I guess one way of addressing that question is, how many other trash cans were along that route on that side of the road that didn't have CCTV cameras nearby?
Did anybody watch the C4 cameras for a lengthier period of time to see what happened to that rolled up item?
I don't know what was watched and what was not watched.
You didn't watch them.
I did not watch it, no.
Michelle told you that it struck her as strange that DULOS would drive past the Starbucks to that location, didn't she?
Yes.
She also told you that she wasn't paying attention, and because she was, talking to or texting family or friends, right?
That's what she told us, yes.
And she did tell you, though, that DULOS had previously thrown away debris in garbage pails and whatnot to get rid of stuff that was left over at its construction sites. Isn't that true? That she told you that?
So I'm not sure.
So I would imagine if she says that she was preoccupied by texting, that would be easy to confirm. So why aren't we seeing that information? Why are the defense not showing that information? Is there cell phone data that is going to be brought forward? I'm waiting to see that, definitely. Good to hear that your family are feeling better, Stephanie. Thanks a lot, Al. Thank you.
So on June 6th, you testified that this was an extra meeting that was arranged through State's Attorney Colangelo, right?
Yeah, my sergeant was advised by State's Attorney Colangelo to contact Attorney Bowman. So
Right, to set it up. And this one took place in his office, right?
yes.
And if we could just put the June 6th up for just a second, just a still of the interview room again. I just want to be clear. If you just move it, maybe just move it someplace. I don't need to listen to it, but just slide it. Okay, stop right there. We're at, what's the time? 2:22:44. I just want to indicate, so behind Detective Clabby, there is a black kind of diagonal stick or stand there. You see that?
I do.
That was a second video tripod that was filming the encounter.
Yes.
I bring this up because at one point in the clip I showed you, it seemed like there was a split second of something that was edited or something. Just it skipped. You recall that in what we played before?
Yeah, it's a skip, but it wasn't edited.
Nothing was taken out, right?
Correct.
It's just that the way the first
nature of the
camera
recording.
was going, it flipped to a new file or folder, right?
Yes, I would go.
But the second camera, which was also filming, apparently wasn't saved by the state police. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. That was a fail-safe in case the first one didn't work.
Thank you.
And that was a much better camera. It was right opposite her face,
You
much
referred
closer to her
to
face.
all of you, the officers referred to Mr. Colangelo as Richie, right?
I don't.
In the room, people were calling him Richie.
There were
right?
people who addressed him as such.
So just so we're clear, since he's not on the screen the whole time, we're talking about the same person, right?
Yes,
State's Attorney Richard Colangelo, right?
yes,
He was the supervisor of other prosecutors in the judicial district here down in Stamford, right?
at the time, yes.
At the time, of course.
Yes.
And it included the area where New Canaan is, right?
That's correct.
I wonder why. Thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. Thank you.
At one point on June 6th, you asked Michelle point blank, what does she think happened to Jennifer DULOS, right?
That's correct.
And she told you that her answer was based on things that Fotis told her, right?
Yes, her initial response.
Yeah. Well, she told you, first of all, that she'd only seen Jennifer DULOS once in her life.
Correct.
She told you about this circumstance where she knew that there was issues about whether she could be present with the children and when Jennifer was there, so she waited outside the pond, remember?
Yes.
And
remember.
that she was waiting there because she was told not to come in yet because the children hadn't left yet.
Yes,
And she recalls seeing, that was the one time she saw Jennifer drives very close and takes a picture of her, right?
yes,
And tried to use that in court. That was what she knew about the circumstance,
that was her
right?
claim, yes.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of what she told you she had learned or heard from Fotis about Fotis's wife's circumstances, right?
Okay,
But she started explaining things that she heard were in the custody study report by the psychologist, right?
Dr. Herman?
Dr. Herman.
Yes,
She told you there were certain mental health conditions. I don't want to specify anything about, there were certain apparent diagnoses of Jennifer that she'd heard about, right?
that was her claim, yes.
Remember, she talked about borderline. Remember, borderline. What do you think she meant by borderline? And what do you think in terms of having contempt for another person? I often say in true crime that I don't like using labels, right? And here you have a mistress who's got a degree in psychology, and I must say psychologists love labels. And now the mistress is a psychologist or got a psychology background, and she's labeling her rival in this whole situation as basically borderline, which is already a kind of abbreviation of the whole thing. In other words, she's seeing her rival as someone who's not reasonable, I guess, someone who's if you having an argument with someone and you think that they are mad or crazy or have some other mental disorder, doesn't that show contempt if you're going to characterize someone that way? Haven't you already dismissed them as someone that you can reason with? In effect, you simply see them as having whatever disorder. You don't see them as whatever their name is. Her name's not Jennifer DULOS. Her name is, she's got borderline disorder. And so how are you going to deal with this person that you can't reason with? How are you going to deal with a person that you can't reason with? That you feel you can't reason with?
Well, you do remember her saying she went for an appointment to see Dr. Herman because she was concerned about some of these things?
Yes, I remember
That if she would have to deal with Jennifer DULOS in the future, she wanted to know all about her?
Yes.
That's good to hear, Pauline, but wouldn't you agree with me that many, if not most, psychologists think in terms of labels? It's pretty common. It's unusual if they don't.
House that Wednesday, right?
Yes.
And she found this out listening to the speakerphone call from Jacob Pytranker, who called Photos, and Photos put it on speaker, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I mean, what kind of, if you want to use labels, what label would you give Photos? I mean, it's someone who doesn't take responsibility for what he does. It's someone who's extremely, like I'm someone who, my followers will know, I'm very reluctant to ever use the term narcissist, but I would use the term narcissist with Photos. He was apparently a very spoiled man who really didn't want to take responsibility for anything.
You, he said that.
Yes.
At one point, though, you told Michelle that Photos was manipulating people. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
And that he had lied to many people, right?
Yes.
And that he was using people, right?
And, you know, those qualities, manipulative, lying, and so on, I don't know if I would use that to describe Chris Watts. Chris Watts wasn't a good manipulator. He wasn't a good liar. He was trying to do that around the time of the murder, but generally you didn't get the sense that that was who he was.
And that was based on what she was told by Photos, right?
Yeah.
About Jennifer.
About, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there were other things she also related about her disappearing when she was younger and living under an assumed name. These are things she related to you that had been told to her, right?
Photos told her those things, yes, whether they were accurate or not.
Exactly, but she believed him, right?
Objection.
She
Sustained.
said she believed him, right?
Yes.
You also told her, though, there were body parts in those garbage bags that he dropped off on Ebony Avenue, didn't you?
Subject, Your Honor. Mischaracterizes.
Well,
So another word that I see used very often is this one, psychopath. I don't think of Photos as a psychopath. I mean, the feeling I get is he was getting upset and riled up and frustrated with the whole custody battle thing. And I don't get although there's a cold, calculated aspect to him, I kind of get the sense that he's a controlling, manipulative, narcissistic person. I don't kind of get the feeling that is a sociopath or something like that. Manipulative, but I don't really get the rest of what that tends to be associated with.
And you started crying when you told her that, right?
Appeared to be, yeah. Yes.
Was that also a technique as part of the interrogation technique, whether you thought it might be true or not, you tell her this to elicit a reaction?
Yeah, the reaction we were trying to elicit is truthfulness.
So just to be clear,
She also told you,
these are symptoms of a psychopath. See if I can go back to that. Where was I? Right? Signs of psychopathy. Behavior that conflicts with social norms. I don't know if he had a lot of behavior that did that. Disregarding or violating the rights of others. I don't think he was generally doing that. Someone was he was married to someone. He had, I think, 5 kids with that person. I don't think Jennifer DULOS would have had so many kids and been married for as long as she was if he was clearly a psychopath. Inability to distinguish between right and wrong. I think he could tell the difference between right and wrong, which is why he tried to cover it up. If he couldn't tell the difference between right and wrong, he wouldn't need to hide what he was doing, including his affair. Difficulty with showing remorse or empathy, that's possible. Some difficulty. Tendency to lie often, that's maybe true. That's maybe true. But has he had recurring problems with the law? Not really. Are there any other items you want to look at? Is he just in general antisocial? Photos DULOS, was he just in general kind of an antisocial personality? Right? Antisocial means someone who goes against society, rules, and other behaviors that are commonplace. He was an employed person. He had a sports life. I don't know if that's fair to say. You might say that going against society's rules is having an affair. Certainly not. It's frowned on by society, but it's certainly not the same as committing a crime. The signs of psychopathy: lack of empathy and remorse, inability to distinguish right from wrong. So there are some symptoms there, but I don't see him as a full-blown psychopath at all. But that's me.
Then one can assume. If the question is, was there a discussion with Michelle Troconis about blood being on the steering wheel? That would be the threshold question.
which I believe was elicited. This was now the next question.
And the next question again, counsel.
All right, I'll rephrase the next.
Just, I can't believe how slow this is going. And just me saying that, I've now lost my train of thought a little bit. You see, for me, the problem with saying something like he's a psychopath means I know exactly who he is. I understand exactly who he is. And through this term, I understand what happened in this case. Why did he commit the crime? Because he's a psychopath. I think the crime itself is extremely psychopathic. And that's true of most crimes. The Chris Watts, the crime itself is incredibly psychopathic or sociopathic, whatever you want to call it. But as soon as you have a label like that, you're basically giving yourself a permission slip to not do the hard work of trying to find out who the person really was. And a lot of people say, I don't want to know who he was. I want to feel good about how horrible this person is. And saying psychopath makes me feel good about how good I am and how bad this person is. That is the lazy approach to true crime. And you see it all over with true crime creators all over across the board. They use that word constantly, and it gives you this feel-good factor. It gives you the feeling that that it's so simple and obvious and clear. And I'm on this side and he's on that side. And as I said, gives you the permission not to actually try and find out who someone is. You might say, again, why would I want to know who a criminal is? It's enough to know that they're a psychopath. Well, in this case, you're trying to find out whether Michelle Troconis was conspiring with a boyfriend. Now you actually do need to spend a bit of time trying to find out who she is as a person, who he was as a person, what is going on in their relationship. Did he love her? Did she love him? Was he using her? Was she using him? What was really going on? And it's very hard work, and it is quite a subtle area, the whole area of identity. Who is a person really? And saying things like psychopath, first of all, makes you sound smarter than you really are, makes you sound like you know the case better than you really know it, and gives you off from doing the hard work. It is hard work. It is long, difficult, not easy work, cobbling together someone's identity beyond the word or the label psychopath. It takes time to get to know a person. Just like in true crime, every case you're dealing with, you're getting to know someone completely different and their world. You know, what is their world? That takes time. And a label doesn't take any time, and you feel like you know what's going on. Calling Rex Uerman a psychopath is equally unhelpful. And I don't think it's true in that case either. I think what's at work in that case is something besides that.
What was Detective Clabby's state of mind when he said it? So asked and answered is sufficient, sustained.
But I was asking now about this witness's understanding, knowledge, not about Detective Clabby's this time.
Well, testimony has been this witness did not claim to know that there was blood on the steering wheel. Sustained.
It's quite interesting. I thought that I saw blood on the steering wheel, but it actually came from the Lacey Peterson case, and now it does seem that there was blood evidence on a steering whel. Of which steering wheel, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Michelle Troconis had not been back at Fort Jefferson Crossing. Is that correct?
I'm gonna object, Your Honor. Lack of foundation.
Oh, well, the questions now are weaving in and out of the video and the nature of the investigation. So the question now is, had Michelle Troconis returned to Fort Jefferson Crossing between, as the court understood the question, June 2nd and June 6th?
I'll just note, Your Honor, there's
Okay, so let's just go out of that for a second. If we go to this article, Hartford Courant, they talk about DNA evidence collected from Jennifer's home and cars. And then there is a reference to a steering wheel somewhere here. Okay, I can't quite find it there. Can you guys see it there? Anyway, if you do this Google search, maybe that's the best way to show it. Riley testified that stains on the steering wheel and parts of the rear cargo area tested positive for blood. Now, doesn't that seem to suggest it's the Raptor, stains on the Raptor steering wheel? Let's see if I can confirm that. On May 28th, Riley processed evidence found in Jennifer's Chevy Suburban. Riley testified that stains on the steering wheel and parts of the rear cargo area tested positive for blood. Now, that's good news for Michelle Troconis, because if there was blood found in the steering wheel of the Raptor and she was in the Raptor at the same time, that could be problematic, right?
Able to move back into Fort Jefferson Crossing, right?
Judge, just gonna object, calls for hearsay, it's also outside the scope at this point.
Well, the court sees it at this point as outside of the scope whether Fortis Doulos was allowed to move back into Fort Jefferson Crossing, so that's sustained. It is about 1 o'clock. What we plan to do is take our lunch and recess from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not discuss the case. Thank you.
So, Stephanie, I just want to respond to what you said. Yeah, if you can keep clippings and take a photo of important aspects and email them to me, that would be awesome. You can take a photo of the headline, take a photo of perhaps a photo of infographics of little items that are worth highlighting, and you can even highlight it yourself in like orange or blue, whatever. Then we can kind of show it on during the live as well. And being able to see the original newspaper as opposed to online could actually be quite good. Okay, so I'm going to take Timmy for a walk. I'm going to think about whether I'm going to come back. Is John Schoenhorn finished with this witness? I've got an idea he'll be finished midway through the afternoon, but I'm probably going to be in dreamland by then. So I don't think I'm going to come back. There are only 100 people watching anyway. I think in the 7 minutes that it was live and I wasn't here, I probably lost 50 people watching. But anyway, so I'm not gonna return. If Pavel Gumini does testify, I'll review that tomorrow. I have already been up and running for over 3 hours minus the break, but it's still quite a long time. Hopefully day 13's testimony will be more interesting. So look out for that. That sounds good, Stephanie. Thanks so much. Is anyone in chat here from South Africa? I know someone said hi from Cape Town. Is anyone in chat here from Cape Town? Okay, you from South Africa? Are you from Cape Town? Gauteng, okay. A friend of mine that died was from Cape Town. I just wondered whether. Touche, are you from Cape Town? Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to take Timmy for a walk. It's little bit late, but it's better late than never as far as he's concerned. I'll see you guys probably about the same time tomorrow. So I'll be covering it live. And hopefully it's going to be more interesting than it was today. I think you'll agree with me, today was one of the most boring days thus far. So we'll see how it goes. Elizabeth from Lancashire. So anyway, thanks a lot, mods, for being here. Even though it wasn't the most riveting trial day, it was interesting having you guys here, and I think we had some interesting conversations. Thanks a lot to everyone who gifted memberships. Thanks to the couple of super chats that are out there. That's always welcome. Welcome to the new subscribers. We at 174,000 subscribers, and I think when I hit 200, I'm gonna be on a plane back to America. So that's kind of my what do you call it? My benchmark. When I hit 200, I'll be ready to return to America. So probably in the next 4 or 5 months or so, we'll see. But if I can get there sooner, then I'll head there sooner. Okay, guys. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Terry. Okay. Thanks, Lisa. See you guys tomorrow. Stephanie, please give my best to your family. I'm glad that they're feeling a lot better. Okay, so we're going to play out now. Let me just get everything arranged. And then that's it. Okay, take care. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.